TV angle toward?
No, not for
yet.
No, thank you.
Good enough.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan, I want to thank you for your time and attention to these matters. We certainly had some lighthearted moments yesterday during the jury selection process, and there's nothing wrong with that. But as Mr. Johnson and I repeatedly told you yesterday, and this is not in any way an overstatement of this, the facts and circumstances here are just simply horrific. I wish that I could spare you from some of the details in this case, but I cannot. Quite simply, it is the position of the people of the state of Michigan that Shanda Vander Ark committed the crime of first-degree felony murder when, during the course of physical and mental abuse in the first degree of her child, Timothy Ferguson died. As we referenced many times yesterday, unfortunately, as part of this process, you will see some very graphic photographs, images that will not easily leave your mind. But I don't want you to focus on just those photographs, as I repeatedly told you yesterday. I want you to look at the entire picture here. I will tell you this, the entire picture is just as horrific. The average 15-year-old male weighs 132 pounds and is 68 inches tall. At the time of his death, Timothy Ferguson was right on that average height, 68 inches tall. At the time of his death, Timothy Ferguson weighed 69 pounds. How does this happen? How does a 15-year-old child die as a result of malnutrition? How is a 15-year-old child 63 pounds under the average weight? How is a 15-year-old child in literally the 0th percentile for weight? How? The how of this begins to unfold on July 6th of 2022 when police officers from the Norton Shores Police Department are dispatched to 4788 Marshall Road in Norton Shores. The first officer on scene is there. ProMed's already on scene, and they've already found Timothy Ferguson deceased in the basement level of that home. You're going to see photographs of that home. It's a bi-level home, and Timothy Ferguson is in the basement of that home. By the time the officer arrives, Timothy Ferguson is deceased and has been deceased for some time. It's immediately obvious to ProMed, just as it is to Officer Stefanich, who you will hear from this morning, that Timothy Ferguson is severely malnourished. Now, there's another layer of mystery that is discovered the next day as it relates to the cause of death of Timothy Ferguson. And you will hear from the medical examiner that in addition to the severe malnourishment that caused his death, Timothy Ferguson also showed signs of hypothermia. How does a 15-year-old child in Michigan in July have hypothermia? The pieces of that puzzle start to unfold as the police investigation does. Officer Stefanich begins to notice, in addition to the shocking image of Timothy Ferguson, deceased, other things unusual in the home. There's leg cuffs in the basement. There's cameras everywhere. There's hot sauce in the bathroom. Upstairs in the upper level of the home, there's locks on the refrigerator and the freezer. More cameras, motion sensors, alarms, everywhere in the house. And in the basement, as if part of some demented version of Harry Potter, there's a small closet, again with an alarm on the door. Inside that closet, a blue tarp just laying on the floor and a small box. That room, as officers later come to learn, is called the small room. That was Timothy Ferguson's bedroom. That's where he was forced to sleep. The leg cuffs, also for Timothy Ferguson. The cameras, also for Timothy Ferguson, to watch his every movement monitored by his mother on those cameras. The bathroom camera. Who puts a camera in a bathroom? The bathroom camera is literally a motion tracking camera, and the officer notices as soon as he walks into the bathroom that the camera starts to follow his motion. Again, hot sauce in the bathroom. Why is there hot sauce in the bathroom? These are all questions at the time the police officers have, but they have no explanation for most of it. All they know is that Timothy Ferguson died as a result of malnutrition. As is obvious to anybody that would just see him, look at him. So Officer Stefanich starts to ask some questions. And Ms. Vander Ark says, well, he's been on a hunger strike for the last couple of weeks. He hasn't been eating. And I noticed last night he wasn't eating really good, so I made him some toast with some peanut butter, or some butter on it, and I made him eat it, and then he went to bed. And then more detectives become involved in the investigation. And more statements coming out from Ms. Vander Ark about some of the unusual things in the home. The leg cuffs. Oh, those are Paul Ferguson. Paul Ferguson is the older boy that lives in the house. He's 19 at the time. And you're going to hear from Paul Ferguson. And I'm just going to tell you right now, you're not going to like Paul Ferguson. I don't like Paul Ferguson. Paul Ferguson was a contributing factor to the death of his brother. What you will come to learn is that what Paul Ferguson was the strong arm for the defendant. When she wanted a punishment inflicted upon Timothy, she used Paul to do it. And Paul did it. And he will tell you that he did those things. And he will tell you he is remorseful about those things. As he should be. Because the mental and physical abuse that those two individuals inflicted upon Timothy Ferguson over the course of multiple months, from February of 2022 until the time of his death in July, caused his death. For all intents and purposes, Timothy Ferguson was a prisoner in his own home. He never went to a doctor. He never went to school. The only time he was allowed to leave the house was if he was being punished and he had to run up and down the stairs in the backyard where nobody could see him, or walk the dog in the backyard, again, where nobody could see him. And you don't have to take my word for it. You will hear in the text messages between Paul Ferguson and Shanda Vander Ark the extent of the horrors they inflicted upon Timothy. You will hear about his every movement being monitored by motion sensors and alarms on his body, multiple alarms on his body. Cameras watching his every move, making sure he did not go upstairs without permission, making sure he did not go to the bathroom without permission. And when he went to the bathroom, he got 1 minute if he had to pee and 2 minutes if he had to poop. Some of you might already be saying to yourself, this sounds too incredible to be true. Again, you don't have to take my word for it. You will hear the text messages. You will see right there in print, right there before your very eyes, everything that I'm telling you. His access to food denied. Locks on the freezer. Locks on the refrigerator. Alarm on the pantry door. Alarms on the door to the small room where he was forced to sleep. Now, interestingly, when we talk about that alarm on the small room, you're going to see the photographs of that alarm. When the police are there the first day, they take photographs of the scene. And as the investigation progresses, they go back the next day. Strangely, that alarm has been removed. The police get the text messages and start to go through the text messages, and a broader picture begins to emerge of what happened to Timothy especially in those final hours leading up to his death, in the early morning hours of July 6th. And what they find is just as shocking as the fact that Timothy died as a result of malnutrition. For roughly the last 9 hours that Timothy Ferguson was alive, he was in an ice bath. First monitored by Paul, and then by Shanda, Timothy Ferguson was forced to lay in an ice bath for 9 hours. Already severely malnourished, already bone thin, forced to be in this bathtub. Again, first monitored by Paul, watched by Shanda from those cameras, and then by her when Paul goes to work. Timothy is too weak to even move on his own volition at that point. That's where the hypothermia comes into play. The medical examiner, puzzled at first, how can there possibly be hypothermia in a child of 15 years old at this time of year? Well, when you spend 9 hours in an ice bathtub, that's what happens. You'll see the ice maker in the home, where the ice came from for his ice baths. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. You're going to hear it all in the text messages. And Ms. Vander Ark, again, when she talks to the police, she says, well, he's just been on a hunger strike for the last 2 weeks. And I didn't know how bad it was getting until last night, and I made him a piece of toast. That's not true. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. On July 13th, almost 3 weeks before Timothy Ferguson passes away, Paul, in a moment of clarity, in a moment of sympathy for his brother, sees his brother without a shirt on and sends his mother a picture. Now, he's already rake thin at that point. Nothing more than skin and bones. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that any rational human being looking at that photograph would say, oh my God, we have got to do something to help this child. What's Miss Vander Ark's response? Okay, give him some bread. A couple days after that, we learn what the hot sauce is for. Make sure you give him the bread with the hot sauce on it. Make sure he eats 4 slices of bread with hot sauce on it, and if he does that and waits 30 minutes, he can have some more slices without hot sauce. This is a child who is already essentially on death's door with his malnutrition. And his mother, the person responsible for his care and custody and well-being, is telling her other son to feed him hot sauce. This isn't the only reference to hot sauce. You're going to hear multiple references to it throughout those text messages. At one point, Timothy commits the horrendous crime of eating the crust of a burger. Leftover pieces of a burger. And when she finds out, what does she tell Paul Ferguson to do? Go make him throw up. Sadly, Paul does that. Go make him throw up because he ate the crust of a burger. It's difficult to wrap your mind around the level of depraved indifference shown to Timothy Ferguson. And ladies and gentlemen, that is why I will be asking you to return a verdict of guilty of a count of felony murder in the first degree and first-degree child abuse. The judge has gone over the elements of that crime, and you have them in your jury instructions, and I won't belabor the point here. But the people's position is that Shanda Vander Ark caused the death of Timothy Ferguson as a result of that malnutrition, as a result of her repeated denial of his access to food during the last months of his life. And that during the course of that time period, she was inflicting emotional, mental, and physical abuse upon him with her actions. And again, you're not going to have to take my word for it. You're going to see the text messages. You're going to hear those text messages. This afternoon, I anticipate that Lieutenant Hooksma and Detective Vaughn will be reading those text messages to you, one playing the part of Paul Ferguson, the other reading Ms. Vander Ark's texts. And like I said, they are shocking. They are truly shocking. Paul's testimony will be as equally shocking. And again, you don't have to like Paul Ferguson. I don't like Paul Ferguson. I hold Paul Ferguson responsible for the death of Timothy Ferguson just as I do the defendant in this case. But as we talked about in jury selection, it's not for you to decide what happens with Paul Ferguson. He's already made his choice, and he's agreed to cooperate and testify against his mother. And he will be pleading to a first-degree child abuse charge here. His sentence to be determined by Judge Case at a little later date. You don't have to like him, but I want you to listen to what he says, because everything that he says is going to be corroborated by the physical evidence in this case, especially those text messages. He's going to tell you how Timothy Ferguson was a prisoner in that home. When the officers arrived that day, they didn't realize they were walking into a prison cell, but they were. And the horrors they uncovered are horrors not even inflicted upon prisoners of war who get the protection of the Geneva Convention. Horrors we don't inflict on prisoners here in the United States who get regular meals and access to small freedoms. Timothy had none of that. That's the how of this, ladies and gentlemen. That is the how of how Timothy Ferguson died. Now, the better question, the harder question, that most of you will likely be asking yourselves is why? When I was in college, I discovered a musical group called 10,000 Maniacs. Their 1987 album, In My Tribe, begins with a song called What's the Matter Here? And it was the first time I remember being aware of socially conscious lyrics for a song. It's a very powerful, very moving song. Natalie Merchant is the lead singer for the group and wrote the song. And the song is about her being a person who's witnessing what she believes to be child abuse, the physical abuse of a child in the building she lives in, and the mental abuse inflicted upon that child by the child's parents. The bridge of the song, after she hears threats made to the child by the father, has these lyrics. Answer me and take your time. What could be the awful crime he could do at so young an age? If I'm the only witness to your madness, offer me some words to balance out what I see and what I hear. These cold and lowly things that you do, I suppose you do because he belongs to you. And instead of love, you've given him these cuts and sores that don't heal with time or with age. Now, in the song, it's implied that she becomes the person who has the courage to speak up and say what's happening to this child and say, what's the matter here? She can stand up and protect the child. There was nobody that could stand up for Timothy Ferguson. There was nobody that could answer the question, what's the matter here? The defendant made sure that nobody could see Timothy Ferguson. Nobody could see what was being done to him. Can't even produce a picture on her cell phone of him in the last 6 months of his life. I don't know about the rest of you as parents, but you can go 10 photos in my photo stream on my phone without finding a picture of my kids. But nothing in the 6 months leading up to his death. What could be the awful crime he had done at so young an age? I can't answer the why for you. I don't have to answer the why for you. You will hear instructions from the judge that I don't have to prove the motive in this case. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, that no why could possibly, as Natalie Merchant says in the song, no why could possibly justify the cold and lowly things done to Timothy Ferguson. All we know is that they were done. And as a result, Timothy Ferguson died without anyone there to speak up for him, without anyone to say, what's the matter here? So, ladies and gentlemen, at the conclusion of these very difficult proofs, I will be asking you to return a verdict of guilty, the charge of first-degree felony murder and first-degree child abuse. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Mr. Johnson, do you wish to make an opening statement at this time?
I do.
All right, you may proceed.
Yes. What he said, I don't have a lot to argue with that. Yup. That's what you're going to hear. All the things you're going to hear those things. Most of that evidence is not going to be controverted. All of it's going to come in almost exactly like he said it's going to come in. And at the end of the day, you're going to say, what's up? Why are we here? We're here, folks. We're here, folks. Because this case is not just terrible. It's weird. It's just strange. It goes into portions of our brains that we hope we don't have. And I say that because I'm a lawyer. I was paying attention to what Mr. Roberts says. One of the things he didn't talk about was what the statute says. And the judge read you this morning. He's going to read you again. The exact word of the statute for this type of crime is knowing and intentional. All the things that he says that my client did, she has to know and she has to intend for either one of these charges to be found guilty. And you know, and if you had a recorder and you could hear his whole speech again, there's nothing about that. She knew. She intended. And you're going to be shown. Text messages. About a telephone book of text messages. And they're going to be read to you. Some of the juicier parts are going to be read to you. And I ask you to pay close attention to those text messages. Because when you listen to those text messages and you're paying attention, and understand, these text messages were made and created at a time nobody knew there'd be anybody who'd ever read them. In other words, nobody's trying to fake what they're saying in here because they don't know anybody else is ever going to read them. So this is what they're thinking at the time. This is what's going in there. All the things that are going in there is raw and it's real and it's unedited. It goes right in those text messages. And what you're going to hear over and over again, over and over, as you listen to these messages, is my client, Shanda Vander Ark, and her oldest son, Paul Ferguson, had no idea that they were hurting this boy. If you listen to those messages, they don't have a clue. And it's two of them. It's not just the one, not her and just him. At one point, he sends her the picture. At another point, she asks him, is he okay? Do you think we should feed him? And each time, the other person deflects and they continue to go on. They don't figure out that they're hurting Tim until he's dead. That's the first time it occurs to them, hey, we got a problem here. And they get mad, and they panic, and they try to make up stories. She's going to testify. She's going to tell you what's going on. But as you listen to Paul's testimony, and as you listen to my client's testimony, neither one of them are aware of what's obvious to him and you and him and all the rest of us. We're all going to see it. How could you not see it? But listen to it. They don't. They see they don't see the suffering. They don't see this. They call what they're doing to him punishments, and they consider it in response to what he's doing. Over and over again. He's not going to win on this one. He's not going to get away with this. He's not going to do this. These are punishments that they feel are reasonable and are not hurting him. I have heard, and I expect Paul to take that stand and to tell you he wishes he could change everything now, and he wishes he could die for his brother now. But at the time he was doing these things, he didn't see a problem with it. In fact, Paul is the one, my client's the one, Paul wants to take it a step further. He wants to start getting physical with this boy. It's my client who tells him you're not allowed to do that. These are appropriate punishments. There's no intention. There's no intention to hurt or kill or to abuse this young man. My client will take the stand. You'll find out she's a highly intelligent person. She went to law school. She passed the bar examination. She was in the process of trying to become licensed as this matter began. She graduated cum laude in her high school, college, the second. I think law school, the second person on the list. She was clerking for judges. She was working and studying, and she was this close to achieving lifelong goals. Then she gets a call from her ex-husband. I'm putting Timothy out, the victim. You want him, or he's going to protective services. She takes him in. She takes him in. She takes him in. Send him to me. I don't want my son in the system. Send him to me. She takes him, she brings him to her home. And then the wheels start to fall off in her life. Her husband gets seriously ill. She's now struggling with the expenses of the home and the 3 children and everything else that's going on. She's working, she's going to school, she's doing all these things. She's not sleeping. And something happens with her and Paul. They tend to see things that I can't, and I'm not a doctor. I don't have a doctor coming here to tell you about this stuff. All I have is Exhibit 1 or whatever it's going to be. That's going to tell you these people don't know they're hurting this kid. They love this child. They don't know. They don't see it. Whatever's going on between them, they don't see it until it's too late. And that's what happens. There is a terrible situation. Everything he said, you're going to hear that's he didn't lie to you. But there's no intention to hurt this child. They love this child. There's no intention to abuse this child. They love this child. But they just don't see what's before their eyes and what you and I can see. They don't see it. And so they continue on a course which was not only destructive to him, but led to this hearing. They have no interest in doing this personally or in terms of their love to their child. This is something they don't know they're doing. They don't get it. And poor Tim ends up paying the ultimate price. But this isn't murder. This is not murder. This is something's wrong, but it's not murder. And we're going to ask you to find my client not guilty. Thank you.